Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me tonight. Welcome to my kitchen island here in Holland, Michigan. And so I'm going to talk tonight about using the Enneagram in times of stress. I don't know what you're experiencing, but it seems to me that there are just so many people right now experiencing stress and tension. I mean, there's plenty of opportunity for that. And what I've noticed on social media is that there are a lot of jokes about marriages falling apart at this time, or parents getting angry with kids, or people dressing up their pets. They're doing all sorts of things to sort of handle the stressful situation we're in. And, you know, it's not really a surprise that there are so many people that are just impacted right now in a situation that is so unusual. None of us have ever faced it before. So I just wanted to start out just by welcoming people tonight that are interested in learning more about what they're like under stress and learning how they can deal with it. And I find that the Enneagram is a great way that could really help us navigate these stressful times that we're living in. So I don't know how familiar people are with the Enneagram, but a lot of people think of it as just a test. But the test isn't really what it is. It's more, I would relate it more to really, it's more like a journey. It's an Enneagram journey is what I talk about. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more. So I just wonder, all the people that are watching right now, what sort of stress factors do you have going on in your life right now? What are the uncertainties? I mean, I know a lot of people are experiencing, if they have a cold or a cough, they wonder if they're getting the coronavirus. That's very stressful to think about that. Other people are experiencing loss of employment or uncertainty about their income or their future income. A lot of people are finding it very difficult to isolate from their families and loved ones or to be separated. But more specifically, I want to ask you, how are you doing in this stress? What are you noticing about yourself? What are the impacts that this time is having on you? Are you behaving differently than you did, say, 2 or 3 months ago, even in your own home, or the way that you're living right now? Is it different than how it was before? And I think if we're honest and if we stop and reflect, we'll realize there are outward signs that we are maybe behaving a little bit differently. So I'm just going to run through some different ways that people might be different under stress. So for example, some people are usually very methodical in their lives. They're very orderly, they run by schedule. But now things have changed for them, and they might be, instead of being methodical, it's all been interrupted, and it can produce just a moodiness, or it could really bring an irrational sort of sense of disorder, really, that is very scary for people that were once methodical. Other people, they've spent all their life sort of socially connecting and being helpers for other people in the community, and now they're sort of like their hands are cut off, and so they really feel that, you know, that they cannot help other people. And so instead of wanting to offer help, if you're living with someone like this, they start to maybe become a little bit more aggressive or dominating. I am looking at that and thinking, you know, this could be a person that's a helper, which is a type 2 on the Enneagram, could be not as sweet as they used to be right now. Things are a little tough for them. Type 3s are achievers, and those people under stress can be people that really, to them, to make a list and check it off and get it done day by day, suddenly that power has gone from them as well. And so some people that are really wired this way might be surprisingly disengaged and sort of apathetic. And all of a sudden, people that were high achievers are now saying things like, what's the point? Or becoming apathetic and really going the other extreme, maybe even struggling to get out of bed. People that are normally isolated, maybe artistic, into their own world and aloof, and they're quite happy with their own company, under stress, these people may actually be people that are now over-involved and are sort of almost clingy. They're pining for relationship, for connection, for intimacy, which is really an unusual way for them to be. Normally, they're quite fine on their own to be isolated. The type 5 is the investigator, and under stress, what we see in them, they're usually detached and emotionally not really connected with what's going on, but more into facts and figures. But it's really funny that if 5s get really under stress, the investigators, they become more like hyperactive, unhealthy 7s. They're very flittery and can't really focus or concentrate on anything. They can't read, and things that they used to be able to do for a long time, they can't do that anymore. As we go down, 6s, which are loyalists in the Enneagram, they are usually steadfast. They are usually really committed to teams, and you can imagine teams now are sort of disbanded, and it's difficult to be and play a part on a team. And so instead of being a team player, a lot of those people have a tendency to want to start hoarding things and bringing things to themselves, and it's really out of fear of the future, and they start to react in that way quite a bit. And then 7s are enthusiasts. That's what I am on the Enneagram. And usually we're pretty well known for sort of being fun-loving party sort of people, or very have a lot of things going all at once. Quite scattered, maybe in that sense. But when stress, I know for me, when stress enters the picture, I become much more perfectionistic, and it's got to be done in a certain way, and I can also be very critical of myself. Usually I'm pretty light on myself, but if I'm under stress, I start to feel very critical of myself, and unfortunately of others as well. And then 8s, which are challengers, they are pretty often, just in a normal circumstance, they're very confident people. They have no problem sharing their point of view, making their opinions known. But under stress, 8s tend to become secretive, and it's almost like the opposite. They really start to go into themselves, and they can even become emotionally detached. Instead of engaging with people, they'd rather isolate themselves. And then finally 9s, and I'm married to a 9, which is a peacemaker. Woo-woo! And there she is listening. They are usually very easygoing people, and nothing really ruffles their feathers except me. Sometimes I ruffle her feathers. But they really, under stress, become chronically anxious, and they do get worried, and they become more like a 6, which is they see trouble on the horizon, and they see it everywhere, and they try and warn everybody in the house. They're overly corrective and trying to warn people in the house. So as I just ran through that list, I wonder what you're noticing about you. How are you behaving at this time? If you live by yourself, it doesn't mean just because you haven't got other people in the house, you're probably experiencing differences.
Do you want them to write it in?
Yeah, go ahead. If you want to write some comments, some of the things that you're experiencing. I know one gentleman just wrote, for him it's financial fear has become a bigger deal at this time. So go ahead and just write down, if you want to comment on that, the types of things that you're experiencing in your place. So, some people aren't hoarding anything, which is great, but you can be very protective of your own and your own people. So as we go on, this is just the opening sort of time that we're going to talk about the Enneagram, and I hope to go into more detail about all those things I just said. And I think it might be beneficial if you were to really start to observe and notice what's going on in your world and in your inner world, and notice how it's affecting you, and then it's how it's affecting others as well. And I think we cannot really do that without a tool. And so that's why I said using the Enneagram as a tool. I have a tool here. I thought, I'll bring a tool just to make my point. The thing about tools is, and we've got plenty probably around the house, they're no good if we don't take them out and use them. And the right tool for the right job is really important. And I feel like the Enneagram used as a tool to help you understand how you react in stress or anxiety could be very helpful, because, I think we think we're controlling it better than we actually are. I don't know if you were to talk to somebody that you're either living with it at the moment or you're talking to regularly, they might be able to give you feedback if you said, how am I coming across? Have you noticed me change in the last few days? Am I different from how I usually am? Things like that. And so I think to get a tool like the Enneagram, I think can really help you just see things that might be invisible to you, but obvious to other people. And I tell you what, I'd rather become aware of those things than go on either hurting or disrupting or causing other people's breakdown in peace or harmony or whatever they need at the moment. So the Enneagram is a tool. Let me talk about that just for a minute. The way that most people get engaged with the Enneagram, and I know some of you that are watching have already done a little bit of work with the Enneagram, is people usually take an online assessment to find out which Enneagram type, and there are 9 of them, that your answers to the assessment most relates to that type. So your answers will cause the test to say, okay, your answers mostly relate to a type 1 or a type 7 or whatever. So that test is simply a collection of your answers and then a categorization of the type that those answers most point to. However, the problem with that is that test doesn't tell you who you are. It tells you how you answered the question. Now, that's a big difference. If there are things about you that you're unaware of at the moment, you may not be fully answering the questions with great accuracy. And so I always say to people, when you take the test, it's a starting point. Probably you've answered a number of questions correctly, and so you're in the ballpark of the type of personality that the Enneagram speaks about you most relate to. I would recommend that if you do take an assessment, that you start reading about the type that your number, the assessment gave you the highest number in. And when you read about that, I recommend that you take a highlighter pen, and if you could print this out, or if you did it in a book, you could take a highlighter pen and start reading about that type. And what you're doing is not letting that reading tell you who you are. You're actually reading it to see if you can see yourself in what you're reading. So when you read something that's a description of that type, then what you could do is you just take a highlighter and you just highlight it and go, I really relate to that statement. Oh, I've never thought about that. Yes, but I do that. And so what you're doing from the test is getting a starting point to begin to see yourself and see whether or not you really do affirm, yeah, that type really does sum me up quite well. Now, when I talk about tests, the test that I most recommend, and I've done hundreds of tests with people, is found on the EnneagramInstitute.com. If you go to that, you can do an online test there. They have a free one, and they also have a longer test. It's $12. And when you do that test, it's about 140 questions. When you get the results, they give you your top 3 scores. And I think that's really good, because when I took my test, I came out with an Enneagram type. Most of my answers pointed to a challenger, which is an 8 on the Enneagram. And 7, which I now relate to, was my second highest score, which is an enthusiast. Why I most relate to 7, when I did the highlighting exercise, reading the printout, when I highlighted all the 8 characteristics, and I had quite a number of them, but then when I read my second highest score, which was a 7, and highlighted that, I had so much more in the 7 category than I did in the 8. And so what I was doing was I was using the results of the test to try and identify myself. It really does bug me sometimes when people said, well, I took an Enneagram test and it told me I'm a 4 and I relate to being a 4. Well, don't let the test tell you what you are. Use the test to find out what you are. I hope that's clear to you. I think that's really important, because the Enneagram is not a personality test that's trying to put you in a box and tell you, da-da, this is what you are, and now you're in that box. It's really trying to help you understand what box you're in and how do you get out of that box. It's not about putting anybody in a box. It's about you understanding what are the limitations, what are the masks, what are the behaviors that I am doing that's putting me in a box. And so back to stress right now. I think we develop patterns over our life of what we do when we're under stress. And if we don't know what those triggers and patterns are, we'll keep returning to it and we'll be stuck in it forever. And the reason I like the Enneagram, it's a tool to help you get out of the box that you're stuck in. And I think that's really great. So even by this little introduction, yeah, Barbara's got a question. Go ahead.
So how would it be helpful in your household at this time?
Yeah, so I think right now, if you've noticed patterns of behavior, for example, some people have mentioned I've seen having trouble sleeping. Okay, if you're noticing that you're doing that, or some of you might be saying, I'm doing a lot of daydreaming, I'm unable to focus on something, or things like that. I think when you look at your Enneagram type, if you take an assessment or if you've taken it before, have a look at what that type you relate to goes to when they're under stress and start reading about that. So normally I would read a lot about a 7, I relate to a 7, but my type goes to a 1, a reformer under stress. So I'll start reading about that and it will give me clues on what I need to do to regulate that perfectionistic, judgmental thing. And so I'm going to unpack a lot of that. You might be saying, well, what do you mean goes to a number? On this Without Walls Facebook page, you'll scroll down and I actually have a diagram of an Enneagram. Ennea means 9 and gram is an illustration. So it's a circle and you can see the numbers of the Enneagram in that circle on this Facebook page. And I believe the red arrows is showing the direction that people move in when they're under stress. And so I think what you can do right now is, it'd be interesting if you know you're experiencing some unusual behavior, to have a look at what your assessment says you are and then look at the direction you move in when you're under stress. I just want to say now too, as we start these sessions, something about my mindset about the Enneagram. I've already told you the Enneagram is a tool. It's for you to use. It's not to bang you on the head and say, this is what you are. It's a tool you pick up and use. Another analogy, my mindset is, it's an invitation to a journey of self-discovery. You can't just take a test and read a few books and then go, now I know everything about myself. We are far more complex than that. I mean, I've discovered with the Enneagram, it's an invitation to an unfolding journey, and it's really helping me form spiritually and in my inner life. And it's showing me things that I previously was oblivious to that are actually having an impact on other people. And so, I don't know, the Enneagram isn't for everybody. But I do think if you're a person that wants to become self-aware, wants to really take account of what is the impact that I'm having on other people, and what are the impacts I'm having on myself, believing lies about myself, the Enneagram can be a great tool for getting out of that. Who am I in the process? Why am I doing this? I do not see myself as an expert on the Enneagram, therefore there's so much more to do on it. But what I do see is this. I'd like to be more like a guide and to help you guys, especially during this stressful season, on the journey of greater self-awareness. And so while I'm speaking, if you've got questions, Barbara's sitting there watching you write things and comments. I would love it if you wanted to ask me a question. I'm quite happy with that. But I'd like me to help you or assist you with understanding how you might use the Enneagram to really get into a place of greater health is really what I would say, to become healthier in the way that you respond to stress and all the changing dynamic circumstances. So, have you taken an Enneagram assessment? If not, I would really recommend you do that, and let me give you a couple of pointers about that. If you are doing an online assessment, I would recommend that you sort of carve out a 20 to 40 minute time period if you're going to do the 140 question one on the Enneagram Institute. And then you do it when you're not sort of squeezing it in between things, or the kids are crawling all over you, or try and just be in a peaceful place and consider the questions one by one. If those questions are difficult for you to answer, I've got a couple of recommendations for you to help determine which answer, because sometimes these questions, you feel like you're none of the answers or you're all of the answers and you have to choose one. I hate that, and you probably do too. But one thing that I think is really important, think about how you would have answered that when you were an adolescent. In high school, probably, you know, that time where you stormed off into your bedroom or fought with your siblings or thought the whole world was going to go down the toilet or whatever it was. Go back to that time when you were an adolescent and go, how would that guy or that woman answer that at that stage in their life? So that's one way I think it could be more of a truthful response to who you really are. That's why, you know, a lot of times adolescents are just coming into who they are, and work and the world hasn't sort of shut them down and they haven't put on a lot of masks. So who they really are is manifesting at that time. So that can be really helpful in determining how to answer those questions.
So there are a couple questions.
Yep.
One of them that Jill asked is, how can you tell, based on these arrows, which ones are in health and which ones are in stress? And so you could just, like, that is...
Yeah, so if you look at the number that you are, so if you look at the number 7, the diagram on the Facebook page, the stressed arrow is the one that has a red arrow on the end of it. So my stress arrow, the red arrow tip for me is pointing to a 1. The yellow arrow tip from the 7 is pointing to a 5. And that is when I'm growing. So the red arrow tip that's connected to your number, pointing to another number, that is the direction you go in stress. So I hope that's clear.
Yeah. So you go to a 1 when it's stressful, and to a 5, which is an investigator. So you're more...
When I'm growing.
When you're growing.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Yes, that's right. I hope that answers that for you, Jill. So, yeah, I was talking about doing the assessment, just like taking your time. The other thing that I highly recommend, this could be homework, when you print out your result and highlight it, I would recommend that you share what you've highlighted with someone you live with and see what they say. And many times, I've done this hundreds of times, people come back and tell me, well, when I showed my spouse or my sister or my brother or a colleague of mine, when they come back, I say, well, what did they say? And they often say, well, duh, I could have told you that. You didn't need to take a test. I mean, it means you're on the right track. Because the people you live with or your close friends know you pretty well. And so that really often happens when you do that. So if you actually do the highlighting, I recommend you share it. The other thing that I would also say, if you've already done the Enneagram and you do know the number that you most relate to, which Enneagram type, I would recommend that you print out from the Enneagram Institute. You can do this as well. Print out the type description of the number you go to under stress, and you begin to highlight what you relate to. And what you'll find, you will probably relate to most of the negative aspects of that number, not the healthier aspects. So there are many wonderful things about a 1. But when I'm under stress, I tend to manifest the less healthy things about a 1. Now, what's good about that is, if I've got a friend that I know is an Enneagram 1 who's pretty healthy, they are often very good advisors to me when I'm in a time of stress. So that can be very, very helpful. So
there's another question from Henry. He said, I'm interested in learning how the Enneagram could be a tool for spiritual growth and development. Maybe this will come up later.
No, that's a really good question. So people often ask me, what's this got to do with biblical stuff? And what I'd say, just let me grab a drink here. I really use the great commandment, thou shalt love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself, as a really great foundation to why self-awareness is so important. I think God wants us to worship him with all of who we are, not just the good bits, but also the bad bits. He accepts us as human beings. And I think a lot of us have grown up in religions where we sort of try and project to God and other people only the good stuff. I think that's why in the Psalm we see David writing, search me, O God, and know my heart. See if there be any wicked way in me. He was a worshipper of God. God wants all of us. And so to honestly face the truth about what are the things I'm like and I'm doing that are real in my life. I don't want to pretend anymore. I want to be real. Then I can bring them to God and I could be worshiping him with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. The other thing is too that as we do that, I think we then, if we're living in that sort of openness with God, it allows God to enter into our lives, and those bits that we find unacceptable, God can transform those places into places where we receive the grace and the forgiveness and the strength and encouragement. And I think that's why the end of that great commandment says so that you can love your neighbor as you love yourself. Because I think we have so many problems with other people is because we hold them accountable for things that we don't even hold ourselves accountable for. But if we get real with God and we open up those areas, I believe we grow in love and compassion for other people. And that's why, a good question, Henry, I think the spiritually formed person is someone who's understanding who they are really and moving towards greater health or maturity and becoming more Christ-like. And not just saying, well, have you ever met people that say, well, that's just who I am, you've got to deal with it, So, those people are not self-aware. God is a loving, transforming God. He accepts us totally the way we are. So the way you're reacting right now in this time of stress doesn't disqualify you from coming to God. This tool can help you bring things to God, become aware of it, and we will go on and talk about practices that you can put in those places instead of those patterns of stressful things. So I just hope that you can really join me. I believe it or not, we've just about finished this time, but I'm going to post again when I'm coming on, and I'm going to try and help you guys during this time look at practices and awareness that will help you to really navigate this in a different way. So Barbara's going to say something else.
So there's one more. I want to shout out to Mel in the Philippines,
yeah.
who asked
Hi,
a
Mel.
really good question, but we are going to keep to the 30 minutes. So Mel, we've got that on the back burner, so we'll be here next time and look at that one. Good question, Mel.
Yeah, I'll keep that, Mel. Thank you very much. And just thank you so much for joining me tonight. 30 minutes, I think, is enough. Feel free to contact me on our Facebook page, or if you email me if you'd like to do that. But it's really been good. Leave your comments below. You can share this video. I'm welcome to have this go out to whoever. But thank you very much for joining us tonight. God bless you, and keep well, keep safe, and keep aware.
Next Thursday night.
Yeah, and I am at this point looking at doing this again on next Thursday night at 8 p.m.
Sorry,
Eastern time.
I'm going to come around.
Yeah, Barbara, come. It's a better picture.
Hi, guys. You're getting the makeup-free me. A couple of you are asking, when do we have, is there a schedule posted for when things are? If you'll go to the Facebook page, we have tried to have something on every single day, either morning, afternoon, or evening. The thing that we're going to add, we added this meeting now, but this week we're also adding a Sunday night intercessory prayer meeting at 8 o'clock too. But if you go on the Facebook page, there is a description of where all the times that we're meeting. So, okay, great.
Yeah, that's for the Without Walls community, and I know there are people beyond that watching this as well, and that's fine. Someone just asked me, boy, I'm going to get off really quick here. Somebody just asked me, where can we see this? You can see this. Once I finish this, it will be downloaded and it will be available and left on the Without Walls Facebook page. So you can watch the whole beginning of this session from the beginning. So Randy Cruz in the Philippines, Manila, God bless you guys. Okay, thank you. Good night.
Good night.